I too acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we gather, and I acknowledge the Premier Gladys Berejiklian, and I acknowledge my parliamentary colleague and chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Armenia, Jonathan O'Day, as well as my many parliamentary colleagues here from the Legislative Council and the Legislative Assembly. My name is Walt Secord, and I'm Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Legislative Council and Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Armenia. And it is an honor to accept on behalf of Labour the Humanitarian Award. Secondly, while there are many areas of policy and priorities that divide us, like expenditure on stadiums and health, we are united. We are united in our support for the Armenian people and the commemorating and recognizing the Armenian Genocide. Yes, I'm here as a friend of the Armenian community, but also as a person committed to preventing and commemorating genocide. As the product of a bicultural relationship, my late father was a full-blooded Mohawk Ojibwe First Nation from southern Canada, and I believe that all genocides require constant remembrance. I believe it is only by truly acknowledging what happened that you can prevent acts of genocide happening again in the future. And that is why I'm proud that I have a tiny personal link to tonight's event. More than 20 years ago, I was the Director of Communications to then Premier Bob Carr, and the Honourable Peter Collins, who I recognize is here tonight, was the opposition leader, along with my good friend Sassoon Gregorian, who is now on the executive of the ANC, who also worked in the office of Bob Carr, who was very instrumental in helping to organize the groundwork behind the motion in the Parliament. At the time, the then Premier Bob Carr and the opposition leader Peter Collins passed a resolution on April 17, 1997, recognizing the Armenian Genocide. Now, as the Premier Gladys Berejiklian has said, they were true trailblazers. And I also wish to acknowledge the then member for RIDE, Michael Photius, and the man who later became Deputy Premier of the state, John Watkins, for their involvement. It was a first in an Australian Parliament, and they all four deserve recognition and praise for their work. That resolution is a reminder of the Armenian Genocide to the then parliamentarians and future parliamentarians. Its initiatives like this are especially important when there are very few survivors of the Armenian Genocide still alive on this planet. Sadly, there are no survivors of the genocide alive in Australia. And that is why it is ever so important that we continue to mark and commemorate the Armenian Genocide. This is because it is not inevitable that we see nations officially recognizing the Armenian Genocide. Admittedly, we all know that the status quo grips hard in political circles. It is hard to change things. That is why it is important to be persistent in your efforts and in our efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, in my own capacity in the last 6 years, I've traveled to numerous sites of oppression and genocide around the world. I've been to Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland in a cold January day. I've been twice to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, the National Holocaust Memorial and Museum in Berlin, Yerevan's National Genocide Museum. I've been to Halabja in Iraqi Kurdistan, where Saddam Hussein tried to exterminate the Kurds. I've even been to the Armenian Denial Museum in rural Turkey, where they attacked Dashnak. So I've actually been there. Furthermore, as part of my own personal education on Armenian issues, I visited Armenia twice, Nagorno-Karabakh, Javak, Western Armenia, including the ruins and sites of Kars Van Ani. I discovered why your name is Ani. And I've also been to the foot of I've seen Masis and Poker Masis. And more recently, in January, I visited the world-famous Gulbenkian Foundation and Museum in Lisbon, founded at the request of a prominent Armenian in 1956. I've also been to the foundation, the Armenian Communities Department in Lisbon, and I even popped in on the way back to Sydney to see the historic Armenian church in Singapore. To my deep pleasure, every time I visit a community around the world, whether it is in Singapore, Lisbon, Van, Kars, Ani, or Yerevan, I discover or encounter a new aspect of Armenian history or how the Armenian community has contributed positively to humanity. On an aside, I was really, really excited that Cher, who I can claim, is Native American as well as Armenian. Sorry, I'll take her as Native American first. So that was a bit better. Back to the formal speech. My own personal historical background and my visits to Armenian sites and other sites of genocide have led me to ask two things. First, how do these things begin? And secondly, how do we as a society prevent genocide from occurring? After all, the perpetrators of such atrocities rely on their deeds being overlooked in time. We know that those who seek to cover up genocide, try to hide or deny such history, only serve to make it happen again. In fact, I believe that denial is actually the final stage in the process of genocide. Genocides happen because people forget, do not remember, are covered up or denied. And that is why we're here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Remembering those events is the reason we gather here tonight. But we also gather to celebrate and hail the survival of the Armenian people, their culture, and their language. On a final note, I pledge to continue to explore and learn more about Armenian issues, the Armenian genocide, but I have to admit that I have very complex views on Turkey. However, I am an optimist, and I hope that one day in my lifetime that there would be diplomatic recognition between Turkey and Armenia. And as Abraham Lincoln said in 1861, when he prayed for peace in the American Civil War, he hoped that the better angels of our nature prevailed in the Union, and I hope that one day Ankara wrestles with its past and fully recognizes the Armenian genocide. True, there have been positive movements recently. In 2016, Germany recognized the Armenian genocide. Last month, the Netherlands recognized the Armenian genocide. Finally, especially at times when you are frustrated and we are frustrated, we ask ourselves a very difficult question. Are we further ahead or further behind on recognizing and getting the community to recognize the Armenian genocide? I say in Australia, we are ahead. We have to be persistent, and one day I hope that Australia too formally recognizes the Armenian genocide. I believe that more people today know of the Armenian genocide than they did 10 years ago. This is due to the hard work and the advocacy and the support the ANC received, and the ANC does. So finally, I'd like to conclude on that note and thank the ANC for the award, and it's an honor and a pleasure to address you.